Hello, South by Southwest 2024. It's amazing to see you all here today. Thank you so much for joining us as we are coming to the end of the climate track. I remember when the climate track kicked off in 2019. I was one of the first climate speakers here. And it was always going to be a dream of mine to bring the legends that have defined this field and this space. 5 years later, that's all it took. We have these icons on stage with us here today at South by Southwest. So let's give them a round of applause. Yes, and keep the energy up. So next to me is David Fenton. David has recently been on a book tour for the Activist Media Handbook. We can cue that picture behind us. There we go. And so this is something we're going to get into a little bit. You're going to learn all about activism and media on today's panel. David also has this picture from when? How long ago was that, David? That doesn't seem that long ago.
1971. I'm doing PR on two phones to get a political prisoner out of jail.
And for those of you who are interested to learn more about this beyond today's session, please check out David's book signing, which will be right after this, in fact. So you're in for a double treat with David. And for those of you who already know Jane Fonda and she doesn't need any introduction, one more round of applause, please. We are so thrilled, and so grateful to have you here. So for those of you who might not know me and are wondering how this activism panel came together, just to give you a brief background, I am the CEO of an organization called We Don't Have Time. I'm also a behavioral scientist. Thank you for those who check out We Don't Have Time and follow us and engage. So you might not know the origin story though. The story starts in Stockholm, Sweden, when the founder of the company, Ingmar Renshag, was walking past Swedish Parliament and witnessed a young girl with braids sitting by herself holding a sign in Swedish with black lettering. Basically, she was striking for climate. This was August of 2018. That footage was put on our platform, and Greta was asked to be brought to the UN where she could actually explain why she was doing this to the world. So we brought her to the UN, Poland, in fact, in 2018. And we can show you a little footage of what happened there. Please cue Greta.
If 97% of all dentists told you a tooth couldn't be saved, you'd pull that tooth.
We kids don't usually do what you tell us to do. We do what you do. And because you don't give a damn about my future, I won't either. My name is Greta, and I school strike until the Swedish election day.
So Greta, what did you think when these fellows approached you?
It was good to have someone to talk with. No one else stopped and talking to me, so they were the first to stop. And so yeah, that felt good that someone saw me and listened to what I had to say.
It's as simple as that. It's listening to what she had to say. And she was mad, and we wanted to give her a platform to voice why she was sitting outside by herself when she should have been in school. And so she was mad, we're still mad, and we know that Jane is actually the maddest of them all. And Jane, I need to throw this first question at you. Why are you so mad about this climate crisis that we find ourselves in?
Could you all sit down? You all, please. Thank you. Just because you're blocking. Thank you. What I'm the maddest about is that what we're facing didn't have to be, because the people responsible knew in the 1970s that what they were burning was causing the climate to change. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. And we know that now because we actually have the reports that the climate scientists who work for Exxon and Chevron and all the others, what they said to the executives of these companies. Just listen to this. In July 1977, James Black, a senior scientist at Exxon, told Exxon's management committee that the burning of fossil fuel was influencing global climate and that if it continued, within a decade, they said, or less, temperatures would start to increase and they'd have to find new ways to get energy. That was 40 years ago. If they had paid attention to that, we'd be okay today. We would have faced an incremental transition from fossil fuels to renewable green energy, and we wouldn't have the crisis that we have today. So that was 1970. A decade later, in the 80s, fossil fuel industry scientists told them that the carbon pollution could double even earlier than predicted, which would mean the disintegration of the West Arctic ice sheets that would inundate entire low-lying countries and islands and flood low-lying farmlands. And that, this is really important for Texas, this is in the 80s. They said we're going to have to find new sources of fresh water. They knew that then. They said the Earth's heating would, and this is a direct quote, drastically change the way people live and work, and that the changes may be the greatest in recorded history, and that the American Midwest and other parts of the world would become desert-like, unquote. That was the 1980s. And you know what they did? They kept right on drilling, and then, dig this, they hired the same companies that worked for the tobacco industry that were trying to tell us that cigarettes weren't dangerous. They hired those same companies to create a lie. I mean, they succeeded in convincing us, A, that there were two sides to the story, that climate science wasn't accurate, that it was really the fault of governments and of us consumers. That was what was creating the problem. Now, I don't know, does that make you mad? I sure hope it does. I hope you get so mad that you do something about it, right? Really, we are the first generation to experience the effects of the climate crisis, and we're the last generation that can do anything about it. And these fuckers, they knew and they don't care. They don't care. As long as they make profits, they're going to keep doing it. So we have to stop being polite, stop worrying in our beds and staying up late. We have to gird our loins, and we have to go out and make them stop doing what they're doing. Do you know that we give them $20 billion a year in subsidies and tax credits? We're paying these people that are flooding us and setting us on fire and killing us and ruining our health. We're giving them our money. We have to stop. Right? You know, I mean, the women in here, you wouldn't publicly date anybody from the tobacco industry, right? I mean, you wouldn't admit that that you were dating somebody like that. That has to be what we do about the fossil fuel industry. Don't sleep with them, don't date them, don't socialize with them. It's over. It's okay to date or sleep with the workers because it's not their fault. They're underpaid and overworked. Don't get me started on jobs. But the executives, the banks, the insurance companies, all the enablers have to become persona non grata.
Okay, so one of the takeaways already is no spreading your legs for big oil or any of its enablers. Wow, okay. Not even 10 minutes in.
And as long as we're on the sexual topic, we also need to shame their paid political prostitutes.
David, why do people not care about climate still? I mean, look how mad Jane is. Look at the enthusiasm in this room, and still there's this resistance to acting on climate?
Well, a lot of people care. Look at the response here. You know, there's 80 million Americans who are alarmed about climate change, but there's a lot of confusion. There's a lack of public education. You know, the media does not tell this story very well. While there's some good print journalism on climate, the television stations are out to lunch. And they're not reporting it, they're not connecting the dots. You know, I mean, all of Texas could burn down, and they're not going to tell you that it's being caused by burning oil, coal, and gas. So the public doesn't know enough. And as they learn more about it, of course, they're not going to just say, okay, kill me, kill my family, destroy my property, you know, destroy my health. But people don't know enough about this. A study just came out today from a great NGO in Washington called Media Matters. And what they found is that the television network coverage of climate change in 2023, the hottest year ever in recorded history, their coverage of the issue went down 25%. And the coverage on the evening news went down 36%. And overall, climate change stories on the networks were less than 1%. And here's the real key. Only 12% of the stories they did mentioned that it's caused by burning fossil fuels. You know, when you ask Americans what causes climate change, the number one answer you get is the ozone hole. And when you ask them how to solve it, the number one answer you get is reduce, reuse, and recycle. By the way, the worst television network with the least coverage of climate change is ABC. Shame on them. Shame on them. And that's Disney. So Disney is not doing its job in educating the public. You know, there's other reasons for this. As we know, scientists and NGOs don't always talk in ways that people really understand. So one of the things we need to do is simplify this for people and use language that everybody gets and create a visual imagery of what we're doing to the earth. Should we show the Katharine Hayhoe video?
Sure, why don't we see Catherine's explanation of exactly what we're facing?
So this is a Texas climate scientist talking here.
Carbon dioxide, or CO2, in the atmosphere traps heat and keeps it from going back out to space. This makes life on Earth possible. Without CO2 in our atmosphere, the Earth would be a frozen snowball. So carbon dioxide is actually a good thing. But as we all know, you can have too much of a good thing. As our cars and power plants pump out more and more CO2, it forms an extra heat-trapping blanket around the Earth. And just like when you were a kid and your mom threw an extra blanket on you that you didn't need, you woke up sweating. That's what's happening to the Earth. That extra blanket is overheating us, and it's affecting our weather. Storms are becoming stronger, droughts more severe. We're experiencing floods as sea level rises, and more intense hurricanes too. We need to kick off that extra blanket to get back to a safe, comfortable temperature for us. And that starts with choosing clean energy that doesn't add more carbon pollution to the atmosphere.
Learn more about climate change and what you can do to help. Go to newclimatevoices.org.
So Dr. Hayhoe is a professor at Texas Tech, and isn't she great? And she really explains this to people.
She's also a Christian evangelical.
That's right. But there's another reason that people don't know enough about this, and that's because of the cesspool of social media. You know, there is so much climate disinformation on Facebook and these other platforms. The YouTube algorithm boosts all this climate denial and disinformation to people just to keep people on YouTube. It's disgusting. They need to clean these platforms up. This confusion is spread on purpose by Exxon and Chevron and Saudi Arabia, and so it hurts the politics. It hurts the ability of people to come together to declare common cause about this. And look, you know, when you say something's an emergency, it can turn a lot of people off. But here's the facts. The world's climate scientists have told us that we have 6 years to cut global pollution in half to have a livable climate. We have 6 years, and we are not moving fast enough. And Exxon and Chevron on these people are funding disinformation efforts today. They're funding efforts to stop electric vehicles today. These people are the enemy. They're among the most evil people that have ever lived when you think about the terms, the scale of the consequences of their actions. And we have to rise up against this. We must.
Sure, yes, please. We have to remember that this industry is putting the onus of responsibility on the victims. And we have to take that narrative back.
Can I
of course.
talk about this? I just, in January, I spent a couple of weeks in Texas and Louisiana making a documentary with Greenpeace. And I thought that I understood what frontline community meant. I couldn't believe what I saw. I couldn't believe the suffering that people are going through because they live with a terminal and a refinery and a chemical plastic. It's all around them. I also found out that Texas is dangerously running out of water. How many people here live in Texas? A few, not most. Interesting. I hear the locals leave when South by Southwest come. But Texas is dangerously low on water because of the drought. This is connected to climate, global warming. This is not just by accident. And yet you know that the fracking that's happening here, because there's a fracking boom. We are the #1, the United States is the #1 exporter of coal and gas, oil and gas. We're bigger than Saudi Arabia. And a lot of it's here. There's fracking going on, and the fracking companies are not made they can use as much water as they want. There's no limit on them. This is not true of other companies. But oil and gas, they can use as much water as they want. I saw desalination plants. The water that's coming from the desalination plant isn't going to Texans, it's going to the companies to keep them running. There are windmills that I saw along the coast, and that electricity isn't going to the communities that lose their power during freezes. It's going to keep the factories going. They don't care about people. One of the, LNG, liquefied natural gas. Got to stop that. People, gas is really bad. Gas is methane. Methane is 80% more dangerous to people in the climate than carbon dioxide. I see what he's doing. I saw this man moving a lot, and I didn't know what he was doing. Yeah, okay. LNG, liquefied natural gas, is coming from the Permian Basin in Texas. It's being exported to countries that outlaw fracking. And one of the executives of the biggest LNG companies called Venture Capital, I keep thinking Vulture Capital, and he said, we love hurricanes. Hurricanes are our friends. They help us get rid of the people. And that's what they're doing. Whole communities are disappeared because of the pollution. So, anyway, you guys are being mistreated. But, those of you who come from Texas, when you go to vote in November, vote with climate in your hearts. Think about climate. You've got a guy here, his name is Henry Cuellar. He's a moderate Democrat, and you got to get him out of office. He blocks good legislation. There was a piece of legislation that would have stopped our tax-paying subsidies to support the oil and gas companies, and he got it killed because he takes money from the fossil fuel industries. He also happens to be anti-choice. And there was a woman running against him the last time he ran for re-election. Young, Hispanic, brave, Jessica Cisneros, fabulous candidate. Also pro-choice, anti-fossil fuels. She lost by 800 votes. Okay? We have to stop this happening. People who are brave, who care more about people than they do about corporations, have to be gotten into office. So that when you vote, you've got to vote with the climate in your hearts. And do something about Henry Cuellar in Texas.
Well, this is why you started your PAC, right?
I started a PAC. It's called the Jane Fonda Climate Pact, to get rid of the Henry Cuellars, to get rid of the people that are blocking the legislation, because we can solve this problem. We have all the technology. You know, I lived totally off the grid with no, you know, with all the alternatives in the 70s. It's there, folks. More jobs, they're safe jobs. It's all positive, and anyway.
well, we are.
It's not that hard. We've got all the answers, but we've got to vote people into office that are going to be good for us.
I have never been happier being off script. We're so off script, and it's fine.
No, I've been talking. No, I'm following.
So before we get too far past the Katharine Hayhoe video, I just wanted to add one point to that, which was that she's an evangelical Christian, as you mentioned, and she is a climate scientist and uses behavioral science to explain how to communicate to audiences, to get them to care so that they receive this information in a way that will result in behavioral outcomes that we want, that get them to the polls to vote, that get them to support campaigns and PACs like Jane's. And so each of you should know that talking to those that are in your network, that are like you, and for Katharine, it's evangelical Christians is one example of a group that she belongs to that listens to her, that goes such a long way. And there's behavioral science and communications science underpinning that. So please, 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 please talk about climate and communicate, because that is the first thing you can do to really start to change attitudes and behaviors.
Talk about climate and health. You know, it's not just about what's happening to the planet and to the atmosphere. People are dying because of this. 1 out of every 5 people that die globally every year die because of fossil fuel-related air pollution. 93% of children worldwide breathe air that affects their development and their health. You know, it's You know, the frontline communities that I just talked about, that I saw that are being so damaged by pollution, you know what the oil and gas companies call them? Sacrifice zones. They don't give a fuzzy rat's ass whether people are sick or dying or whether their community is destroyed. Sacrifice zones. These are not people who should be running our lives and our country, and they are. Because all the people that we're electing, or too many of them, take money from these people, especially in Texas. I mean, we're running out of time. And there's so much that you can do, but you know, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. We have to unite, we have to join organizations. It's going to require unprecedented numbers in the streets, the way it did during the Depression. You know, all the things that we treasure, 8-hour workdays, children not having to, well, now it's starting to bring children. Anyway, you know, child labor, the 5-day work, all of the things that we appreciate today in our lives, that came because of people protesting by the millions. And when they met with FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he said, I agree with you. Now go out and make me do it. So we can't just vote, we have to make them do it. And we have to do it with everything we have, because so much is at stake.
You know a little something about this, don't you?
Well, you know, Jane and I in our lifetime have seen social movements succeed, and we've seen people power create enormous transformations, ending Jim Crow in the South. That was people power. You know, stopping the draft and ending the war in Vietnam. That was people power. Gay marriage, the same thing. You know, we saw people power reverse the nuclear arms race and force Ronald Reagan to negotiate arms control negotiations. That didn't happen because Reagan wanted to do that. He was forced to do it. So we know, we've seen it, that people can come together and overcome what seem insurmountable odds. So now we have a situation that, you know, when I describe it to people, I sound like a really crazy radical. But the actual situation that we face is that there's about 100 white guys in the fossil fuel industries and they're bankers who know that they're destroying life on Earth, that they're going to flood all the coastal cities of the world, that they're going to make it impossible to grow food, that they're going to spread disease. They've known all this, as you've heard, for 50 years. And they've been lying about it and trying to stop it that long. So are we going to let them get away with this? Okay, so imagine what Shakespeare would have done with a narrative like this. 100 guys versus the survival of human civilization. Kind of dramatic. Did you have a challenge you wanted to issue about this to the creative people here?
How many creative people here? We're told that create. Okay. Oh, yes. Great. There's a real role for creative people here. Art, you see, a lot of people have preconceptions of things and prejudices, but art oftentimes is the thing that can pierce through that and affect people when their guard is down. It can be painting, it can be poetry, it can be songs, it can be movies, it can be, China Syndrome really changed a lot of people's minds in terms of nuclear energy, for example.
That was one of Jane's movies, for those who don't know.
I don't know if any of you saw it, you're probably all too young, but 9 to 5 really opened people's eyes about what women office workers have to put up with. Dolly Parton just wrote a climate anthem. It's fabulous. And, write songs, make movies, write poetry, create sculpture. Do what you can do to get through people's minds and with what's happening. Join the fight. We need creatives here.
We need more content on people's phones. People aren't seeing or hearing enough about this. The Yale Project on Climate Change Communications does these surveys every year. And they consistently find that 2/3 of Americans report they rarely or never see or hear anything about climate change. 2/3, rarely or never. We could fix that, and the people in this room could do that, and so let's do it.
We should be talking about climate in the same way we talk about pop culture and sports and all things that are on the front page of the news, politics. We should be bringing climate to that level of just ubiquity. So I know that this is where it can really start. And let it be something that motivates you through humor or through anger, whatever is actually pushing you forward to talk about this. It's all got a role to play. Everyone has something to contribute to this. And the media really needs to step up. The media has not been doing a good job, and you've touched upon this, but I'd love to get into it a little bit more. Why has the media been so terrified of actually relaying the facts? What is it motivated by?
Yeah, it's a terrible failure. Again, I'd like to stress there's some really good print journalism about climate change. But when it comes to social media and the television, local television and network television, it's a wasteland. It's really, well, first of all, I'm not excusing the media, but they get attacked a lot by these companies. They're intimidated. In fact, and they've attacked climate scientists too. In fact, Michael Mann, the great climate scientist, just won a defamation lawsuit against right-wing people funded by the fossil fuel industry who were misrepresenting his work and saying he cooked the books and made up stuff. None of it was true. Michael created the hockey stick graph that showed that we had stable temperatures through the era of human civilization, and then all of a sudden, in the last 100 years, bang, like that, the so-called hockey stick. And they knew that was a symbolic power if people saw that. So they tried to undercut it, and they defamed him. He just won. And of course, advertising plays a role.
That
Michael Mann,
won.
he just
Michael
won.
just won his defamation lawsuit.
Advertising plays a role. The false journalistic sense that you have to give, both sides equal time. I'm sorry, there's only one side of physics. There's only one side of science. This is nonsense. And the fossil fuel industry, they're master propagandists, and their strategy, as you heard, was like tobacco, to spread doubt. Scientists don't agree. And actually, the scientists do all agree. All the climate scientists agree. So why don't we show the 97% ad?
97%.
Cue 97%.
If 97% of all dentists told you a tooth couldn't be saved, you'd pull that tooth. If 97% of all engineers told you your house was unstable, you'd move. And if 97% of all airline workers told you not to get on a plane, you wouldn't. So, when 97% of the world's climate science experts tell you our planet is warming and we're responsible, why would you ignore them? When you're 97% certain, you're certain. Protect America from climate change.
Right? We need more of these kinds of ads. You know, Adam McKay, who made Don't Look Up and The Big Short, has started a climate content production studio called Yellow Dot Studios that I think you'd enjoy. We need many more efforts like this. We are in the battle for the survival of humanity, our civilization, not to mention 80% of the other species on Earth. Now that sounds crazy, but that's actually the struggle we are in. I mean, look at this. Just here in Texas, you had 80 days this summer over 100 degrees in this part of Texas. You had 40 days over 105 degrees. It was the driest year in 113 years. 2023 was the warmest year ever. It's not complicated, you know? If you trap heat on Earth, it gets hotter. Say it loud. Okay, we had 28 climate disasters last year, each of which were over $1 billion in damages. There are 3 billion fewer birds now than there were in 1970. And you notice that when you drive, there's no insects on your windshield. Those of us who are old enough, we remember there were always insects. We're killing everything. And this is a web of life. So we are hurting ourselves. That's what, you know, the oceans are being destroyed. We get 2/3 of our oxygen from phytoplankton in the ocean, the rest from forests, which we're destroying too. This is suicide and ecocide, but it's not your fault. It's the fault of these very greedy people who've been purposely lying and stopping progress and corrupting our politics.
Let's not forget who came up with carbon footprint in the first place.
Yeah, you know, this was British Petroleum, created the term carbon footprint, so the blame would be shifted onto you, not them. Pretty diabolical, huh? They use language very, very carefully, and we need to get better at that. So yeah. And the media, really, of course, Fox News is the worst, but they're all bad. But at least Fox News is so bad you can make fun of it. Shall we show?
Yeah, why don't we show the
parody ad.
Parody.
Fox parody.
Residents have once again been asked to conserve water as the drought reaches its 16th consecutive month. Smoke from the Rockingham County wildfire was actually visible from a satellite 22 miles in space. Southern Californians flock to beaches in record numbers as temperatures soar for the 4th consecutive week. Florida residents are bracing for more coastal flooding as storm surges continue. I hope you all have a wonderful night.
See, this is all really terrifying, right? But we need to find humor in it because this is also very motivating for people. We know that we've got to have fun with this a little bit too. We're going to solve the end of the world, guaranteed. Right, Jane? I know you have thoughts on this. We are going to be able to connect the dots. How do you think the media can actually play a better role at connecting these dots? What would that look like?
They would say that extreme hurricane that hit Kansas is because of the pollution created by British Petroleum and Shell and Chevron. And, you know, they would name names. We have to name names to rob them of their social license, right? They would say, this is global warming and this is what causes it. That's what connecting the dots is. You know, I'm trying to put myself in your shoes when I listen, and we cannot go down a hole of despair. I come from a long line of depressed people. And I have a tendency myself. And 4 or 5 years ago, I was going down a hole of despair. It was hard to live. Birds were falling dead out of the sky over New Mexico and Arizona because of dehydration, because of the fires along the coast in California. The sky in Los Angeles was orange-brown. It was apocalyptic. It was 112 degrees. And I didn't know what to do. I mean, every time there was a protest, I would go. You know, I did stuff. But I'm Jane Fonda, and I have a platform, and I knew that I wasn't doing enough. And And then I read a book by Naomi Klein, which really hit me, and I called up Annie Leonard, who's over there. She ran Greenpeace at the time. And together we created Fire Drill Fridays, because there are all these people, like what percent? 70% of Americans are concerned about the climate. And when asked why they haven't done anything, they say, nobody asked me. So the great unasked, that was our target with Fire Drill Fridays. We wanted to get people to do more than be concerned, to take action. And I just want to say, the way to not be depressed is to take action. This is what Greta Thunberg, she says, don't go looking for hope, look for action, and hope will come. And when I went to DC to get arrested and rally every Friday, I wasn't depressed anymore. Every time I take action, I get hope, partly because if you're smart enough, like I am, to join organizations and not try to do it on my own, then you meet new people, you make new friends who have the same values you do. I mean, it's like going to AA. You know, AA is great because you make a whole new group of friends, and you do that too when you join the climate movement, and you discover that it's fun to be an activist, especially when you know that we have all the answers. We know how to do this. We have the money, the smarts, the technology, and everything. It's political will. It's that we've got the wrong people in charge, and we can change that, right? We outnumber them. You know, and so, I mean, that's why we're all here. We at any opportunity, we wanted to take it for people to say, come on, do you understand what's coming for us? And we are so not prepared. I mean, the diseases, as the world warms, all these new mosquitoes and other vectors of diseases are moving to new places, and we don't have the resilience to them. And so these new things are becoming, I don't know, what did you just say dengue is where?
Yeah, Brazil is having a terrible dengue fever outbreak all over Latin America. The range of the mosquitoes is increasing with temperatures. They're going up to higher and higher elevations. Malaria is increasing. Yeah, allergies are increasing. You know, carbon dioxide causes more plant growth, so it's increasing allergies and all sorts of terrible health effects. But the thing to keep in mind is that there's a much better world in front of us. There is so much hope. We know, as Jane's telling you, how to solve pretty much all of this. We have 98% of the technologies that we need to get clean energy and clean transportation and transform agriculture and have a much cleaner, healthier world where energy is much cheaper. Because, you know, once you put up the solar panels and the windmills and the batteries, there's no cost of fuel. That's why, you know, Darren Woods at Exxon doesn't like this, because you won't have to keep paying him. So they're really opposed to this. So we know how to change the world. We have the technology. Electric planes are coming. Advanced biofuels are coming. All kinds of ways to save energy. You know, the oil companies try to tell you, oh, you won't be able to take vacations, you'll have to sacrifice, you know, you'll have to walk, you won't be able to drive. That's just all nonsense. We're going to power the world differently, and we know how, and it's much cheaper, and will create much more wealth and much more health. So that's worth fighting for, right?
And just
you know that for the last, since most of you have been alive, the last 40 years, every war that we have fought has been fought over oil. So when we start running our society on sustainable, renewable things like wind and solar, maybe we don't have to go to war anymore. We don't have to worry about terrorism, because with solar you can have a community-run source of your energy. It can be decentralized. It can be truly democratic and much less subject to the kind of things that caused Texas to lose power. You know, it's nothing but positive, but it's just that they've brainwashed us, and they've made us, and we've become so individualistic. It's just me, me, me. You know, I was born in '37. We weren't like this back then. There was much more a sense of the common good, of the collective, of the society. You know, it's Reagan. It's during the Reagan administration and the Thatcher administration that they started saying the collective is bad. And, I mean, Margaret Thatcher even said there's no such thing as society. And they started elevating the notion of individualism, which is a terrible thing because we're facing a collective crisis that requires collective action at a time when we're being rendered powerless because we're becoming tiny little individuals. We have to break through that. Fuck them. Join together and fight.
So both David and Jane are talking about a transformation, and we're a transformation to a clean energy future, which is going to be more breathable, less polluted, cleaner, all of those things, that cheaper, all of these things. And the one thing I want to make sure that we mention, that we can get into a little bit more, can you imagine a future that's truly equitable and truly just? It's a new future altogether where those that are contributing to the solutions to clean energy are also benefiting from their outcomes, not just in health, but economically. And so this is actually very exciting to think through how we are going to really equitably share in this brighter, cleaner, less polluted, fairer future.
You know, monopoly capital corrupts democracy when it gets out of control, when there's excessive concentrations of wealth. The most excessive concentration of wealth in the history of humanity is the oil, coal, and gas companies. They're the richest industry on earth. They're the richest industry that has ever existed on earth. And they have corrupted our democracy. So as people power rises up, which is inevitable, people are not going to lie down and just let these companies ruin their kids and their families and their future and their prosperity and their health. When people finally understand this, of course there's going to be mass movements and civil disobedience and social actions, and these people will be voted out. There's no question. There's only one question. Will it happen in time? Because we have very little time, because every molecule of carbon dioxide and methane we put in the atmosphere, especially carbon dioxide, stays there for hundreds and hundreds of years. You know, we think of pollution coming out of a smokestack and coming back down. This doesn't come back down on the human time frame, which most people don't know. So we're going to keep trapping more and more heat if we don't reverse this. Now, another thing the oil companies try to scare you with is, well, you know, you won't be able to drive to work. You won't be able to heat your house. You know, these activists, you know, they want to ban fossil fuels tomorrow. Well, that's just a lie. You know, of course we have to have a transition. The problem is our transition's much too slow, and they're working every day to slow it down further. So the scientists will tell you it's a race against time. So we have to rise up and change the political dynamic of this. And again, we've seen this happen successfully when nobody thought it would. We've seen millions of people in the streets. We've seen people organize, create new organizations. We've seen cultural figures and artists inform the public to rise up. And this is going to happen again. And I hope you all will help it happen faster, because we have very little time. Isn't your
There could be one problem,
we don't
though.
have time.
It depends on who gets elected in November. If the orange guy gets it, you know, Biden provides us a context in which we can fight, and we can pressure him. He just called a pause, a halt on all exporting of LNG, all new LNG terminals. It's not sexy, it didn't make headlines, but it is so important, so important. So now we have to re-elect him and make the pause permanent, and understand that on the other side, we wouldn't get a chance to do that. I mean, we'd still have to fight, but again, this is the existential election year. This is the most important election year. I know that people say it all the time, and it's kind of lost its meaning, but this is it, guys. What? And guys and girls, I don't mean to say guys, I hate that. You know, all the way down the ballot, especially in Texas. You know, the people in Texas who have the most power, besides the governor, over the pollution of Texas and the well-being of Texans is the railroad commissioner. The railroad commissioner, actually there's 3 of them. They determine whether the grid collapses or not, and they all work for a fossil fuel company. They get money from the fossil fuels. We have to change those people that are on the commissions that can really, you know what I'm saying. But unless you're gonna pay attention to what's down ballot and who those people are and who they work for and where they get their money from, I mean, this is a year that you gotta get granular, really pay attention to where these candidates are getting their money from. Yes, and vote the bad guys out of office, and there's just too many of them. They're mostly guys. Well, there are a few gals, but anyway.
David, do you agree?
Yeah, of course. Look, it's kind of terrifying. The degree to which this con man, the orange guy, has fooled so many people. I'm sure in your families, you know, in your neighborhoods. He's fooled a lot of people, and the media has cooperated because he's good copy and he gets ratings. It's horrible. And did you see what he said? You know, they asked him, well, some people say you're going to be a dictator. And Trump said, yes, I'm going to be a dictator for one day. And on that day, I'm going to drill, drill, drill. First of all, he doesn't really mean only one day. And drill, drill, drill means kill, kill, kill. You know, we cannot use the vast majority of the oil, coal, and gas reserves that we know about, that these companies have. We can only use a small portion of them and maintain a livable climate. That's the fuel we need for the transition. But they're all drilling to the ends of the earth to make more money and find more of this stuff, and we can't burn most of what we have. Insanity. And the banks are backing them. You know, Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan Chase, you know, people say he's a smart guy. $350 billion for new fossil fuel exploration. Suicide investing. How smart is that? This is nuts, and only the people can stop it. Only.
Wow. I don't know if either of you are either of you really telling us how you really feel, or I love that you're calling out names, because we need to be able to point fingers so we can actually identify who we collectively can get together and hold accountable. So that's wonderful. Keep doing that. I would also want to say that the oil industry broadly is subsidizing our extinction. We are supporting that through trillions in subsidies. Just 2 years ago, I was on the stage with Nikolai Coster-Waldau, who's Jaime Lannister in Game of Thrones. And so the Game of Thrones fans came in hordes and learned all about what the oil industry was doing globally and how we were literally funding our own extinction. And so that is kind of the general umbrella that I want to make sure is taken away. And then really specifically, who do we identify, and who do we collectively come together and hold accountable? Tell us some more names, and tell us what these individuals can do.
Exxon, Mobil, Shell, British Petroleum.
Yeah, but let's get personal, okay?
Can you believe that Rex Tillerson was our Secretary of State? Rex Tillerson, who was the CEO of Exxon, was made Secretary of State by Trump.
You know, I once was in a public forum with old Rex, and who's right out of Central Casting, right? And I said to him, wait a minute, you don't really plan to keep toasting the earth and burning us all up, do you? That, you know, your products, you know that they're heating the earth. This is about 10 years ago.
You said this to him?
I did.
Okay.
At a forum in New York. And he said, well, you know, yes, we don't deny it. You know, oil, coal, and gas are heating the earth. It's true. It was the first time he ever admitted it. And he said, yes, it's true, because I had said, you know, sea levels are going to rise and flood all the coastal cities of the world. He said, that's true. There's going to be a certain amount of sea level rise, and yes, we're going to have to relocate some agriculture. It's true. And he said, but these are engineering problems, quote unquote, and there are engineering solutions to them. And I'm like, this person is mad. He's insane. He thinks he can engineer the earth, that he's more powerful than nature. Oh my goodness. That's what they think. That's their mentality, that they can solve everything. Well, sorry, this is a complex system they're ruining here. They can't solve everything. But Darren Woods is the CEO of Exxon now, and just 2 weeks ago, I believe it was in the Financial Times, he blamed global warming on you, on all of us. He literally said, well, we can't do this energy transition because the public won't pay for it. I mean, the gall of this man, who has purposely stopped all progress on this and controls most of the Republican Party. I mean, shame on him. And who's the CEO of Chevron? I'm forgetting his name right at the moment. I'm having a senior moment. But he's another one. He's a slick liar. Slick. And so these people should be made household names. In fact, I have a proposal. So how about in Texas, we recruit the children of these criminals to come out against them? Right? Okay? Because they're criminals. They are knowingly and actively killing us. Okay, it sounds crazy, leftist, radical, and say, it's the truth.
I know I said don't hold back, but damn, okay. All right. So what else do we need, though? We have a few minutes left, and I want to make sure we get to the action steps that this audience and those that are going to be tuning in and watching this from all over the world can take to really support this transition to clean energy. Not everyone's an activist. I think we've inspired a lot of activism. I think those that were thinking about how to get involved will definitely move in the direction of activism at whatever level they're comfortable. But beyond that, what else can folks do to really plug in?
Well, I mean, there are things you can do individually, like be sure that you've got a clean house in terms of investments. For example, don't invest in fossil fuels. Make sure the bank that you use doesn't invest in fossil fuels.
Your 401k.
Your schools, your city. Try to get together with other people in your neighborhood and your city to defossilize where you live, for example. But there are so many organizations to join, and that's where you can really have an impact. We have to be ready to put our bodies on the line and go into the streets. Greta Thunberg with her little solitary demonstration in front of the Swedish parliament, it sparked a global movement. 6.5 million people in the spring of 2019 were in the streets. And that's why there are 70% of Americans who are concerned about climate. When that number of people get out, you think, oh, something must be really wrong, and they start paying attention. So we need people in the streets. We need people to join organizations, which is the best way to be effective. I mean, I'm a famous person, but I belong to organizations. I don't try to do it by myself because I'll be too vulnerable. So join with others. You'll make new friends, and it'll have a big impact on your life, and it's all good. By the way, something else? During Fire Drill Friday, one of the things that I learned that meant a lot to me, if there was no racism, there'd be no climate crisis. If there was no patriarchy, there would be no climate crisis. It's part of a mindset that puts things in a hierarchy. White men at the top, forgive me, there's a lot of good men, but historically, it's white men at the top, nature at the bottom, women somewhere down there, especially women of color. Everything is transactional and hierarchical. White settlers arrived here from Europe and saw these beautiful forests and thought, flooring. Boats, doors, chop it all down. And then we got to bring some people over from another country that can work the land, because God forbid we would do it, and call them not humans, because then we can call ourselves a democracy. And of course, none of this is taught here in Texas, right? You're not allowed to tell the truth about our origins. But anyway, it's a mindset Not only we have to solve the climate crisis, and we have to change our mindset. We have to all reconnect with nature, understand this is our home. Even dogs don't poop in their own kennel. We're destroying our kennel. And we have to instead learn to love it, reconnect with it, understand how it supports us. We have no business destroying all these. 69% of wildlife is extinct. How dare we? Only it's not we, it's them. So let's just do what he said.
Well, what I say is Jane's PAC is electing important climate candidates and defeating anti-climate candidates. And is it janepac.com or .org? I forget.
.com.
Jane PAC, JANEPAC.
You can do this. Go, you can do this. You can text SW South by Southwest. S by Southwest. SXSW 40. What is it? 40506. 40506. SXWS. South by Southwest 40506, and you can find out who we're supporting. We can let you know what are some important candidates that you can volunteer for. You know, the down ballot candidates, they don't have the volunteers and the money and the media coverage. We can change that. We can help them. Starting with your goddamn Railroad Commission. We have to change the Railroad Commission in Texas, and elect people like Jessica Cisneros, and get rid of the Henry Cuellars.
And I would add, for content creators, which there are many here, so we have a very big problem. You know, there are 7 states that are going to decide the next presidential election. And Texas is not one of them, but Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Michigan, Pennsylvania, I think Wisconsin, Georgia. So the polls are showing that the people most concerned about climate change are going soft on Biden, who of course is a mixed figure. He's done a lot of great things for the climate, some not so great. On balance, great. But they're either moving into not voting camps or they're moving to Trump. Young blacks, young Hispanics, young non-college educated women, a significant number are moving to Trump. They're all very concerned about climate change. They don't think Joe Biden has done anything about climate change. They've never heard of the Inflation Reduction Act and all the tax incentives for electric cars and insulating your house, and they don't know anything about that. And they either don't know or have forgotten that Trump, when he was president, basically made war on the environment and put the polluters in charge. So we need to remind people in those constituencies, in those demographic groups, in those states, that this is the climate election, because it's the most motivating factor to them. But they don't know what's going on because of the media failure we have. And also, as we know, President Biden is not a great communicator. So we have to do it.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Jane. One more call to action before we bring this to a close. Please download the We Don't Have Time app. It's in your phones. It's easy to find. It's free. And you can plug in immediately to contributing to the climate crisis. So many solutions, so many campaigns. We'll make sure the PAC is on there too. And you can really start today if you haven't already. No more excuses. Together we are going to overcome the climate crisis. Thank you to my panelists.
Can we not take questions?
We're not taking questions.
Not taking questions.
Thank you to my panelists, and thank you all.
Thanks, Arthur.